In the cozy suburbs of Colorado, a few years back, we meet the protagonist of our story, Eric, a 40-year-old mechanical engineer who's built a stable life for his family. Eric's the kind of guy who grew up dreaming of a simple, happy life. A good job, a loving wife, and a couple of kids. And for a while, it looked like he'd managed to get it all. He's dedicated, loyal, and someone everyone sees as dependable. Eric's wife, Rachel, is a stay-at-home mom, managing their household and keeping up with the busy schedules of their two kids. Emma, 15, and Ben, 12. Rachel's a charming, outgoing woman with an effortless sense of humor and a way of lighting up every room she walks into. Together, she and Eric seem like the picture-perfect couple, a duo that friends and family admire. But, as we're about to see, appearances can be deceiving. Eric and Rachel have been married for over 17 years. They got together right out of college, when they were both still figuring out who they were and what they wanted from life. Eric fell hard for Rachel's lively spirit. She seemed to bring color to his world, which felt dull in comparison. Over the years, they built a life together, sacrificing, saving, and supporting one another as they raised their family. But lately, there's been a shift. Eric feels a growing distance between them. Rachel seems restless, distracted, and spends more time on her phone than engaging with him or the kids. Eric's noticed, but he brushes it off, thinking it's just the pressures of everyday life. Their social life also plays a big part in this story. About a year ago, a new couple moved in across the street, Mike and Jenna. They're younger, newlyweds with no kids, and full of energy that naturally draws people to them. Jenna, especially, is friendly and outgoing, quickly becoming friends with Rachel. They start spending a lot of time together. Yoga classes, coffee dates, and what Rachel calls wine nights, which Eric's not too thrilled about. But he trusts Rachel. After all, 17 years of marriage have built a foundation that he believes is unshakable. However, Rachel's behavior continues to change. She's dressing differently, more stylish, and Eric can't help but notice she's looking more put together than she has in years. It's like she's become a different person overnight. When he compliments her, she brushes it off, making excuses about wanting to feel a little better about herself. Eric feels a pang of insecurity, but he pushes it aside, trying to be supportive, even though he doesn't understand what's fueling this sudden change. One evening, Eric's suspicions start to take root. Rachel had been gone all afternoon at what she called a spa day with Jenna. She texted him around lunchtime, saying they'd be back for dinner. But by 7 p.m., there's still no sign of her. Eric tries calling, but she doesn't pick up. He sits down with the kids, who start asking where Mom is, and he tries to keep his tone light, even though he's feeling uneasy. Eventually, she comes home around 8:30 p.m., flushed and laughing as she steps through the door, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek before heading upstairs to shower. When Eric asks about the spa, she's vague. She mentions a few treatments they got, but doesn't give any real details. Feels like she's hiding something. As the weeks go by, Eric's worries grow. Rachel's spending more and more time out of the house, sometimes not even telling him where she's going. She's always got an excuse, some reason for why she can't be home, but there's a pattern emerging, and Eric can't ignore it. The distance between them grows, and their once regular date nights become rare. Intimacy starts to fade, too. Rachel's either too tired or has a headache. Eric tries talking to her about it, but she brushes him off, saying, "It's nothing. You're reading too much into it." But deep down, Eric knows something's wrong. One Friday evening, Eric's on his way home from work when he spots Rachel's car parked outside a coffee shop in town. It's unusual because Rachel had told him she'd be home with the kids. Curious, he pulls over and decides to go inside. He's not prepared for what he sees. Across the room, sitting in a secluded corner, Rachel is laughing and leaning in close to Mike, their new neighbor. Eric's heart sinks. He stands there, frozen, watching them talk and exchange playful touches that feel far too familiar for two people who are supposedly just friends. Eric turns around and leaves without saying anything. He drives home, his mind racing, wondering if he just imagined the whole thing. He feels a mixture of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. He tries to stay calm, but when Rachel walks through the door that night, he can't keep it in. He asks her directly, "Were you with Mike today?" She stumbles over her words, caught off guard, but quickly recovers, insisting they just run into each other by chance and grabbed a coffee. Eric doesn't buy it, but he doesn't push further. He knows that pressing her for answers will only drive her away, and the last thing he wants is to lose his family. Over the next few weeks, Eric finds himself caught between suspicion and denial. He wants to believe her, wants to trust her, but the doubt eats away at him. He begins to feel like a stranger in his own home, watching Rachel closely, looking for any signs of betrayal. And then, one night, he finds exactly that. While Rachel's in the shower, Eric notices her phone lying on the nightstand. He's never been the type to invade her privacy, but desperation drives him. His hands tremble as he unlocks her phone, scrolling through her messages until he finds the thread with Mike. What he reads shatters him. Their conversation is filled with flirtation, secret meetups, and plans to be together without anyone knowing. It's undeniable proof that his wife, the woman he's loved for almost 2 decades, is having an affair. Eric feels his world collapse. The stability, the trust, the years they'd spent building a life together. It's all gone in an instant. But instead of confronting her immediately, Eric holds back. He's not sure why. Maybe he needs time to process it, or maybe he's waiting for her to come clean on her own. He goes through the motions for the next few days, keeping his emotions in check for the sake of their kids. But inside, he's a storm of anger and hurt. Then, one evening, Rachel suggests they go out for dinner, just the two of them. She says it's been a while since they spent any time together and that she misses him. Eric agrees, but he can't shake the bitterness he feels. Eric and Rachel are out for dinner, but the atmosphere between them is tense. Rachel seems cheerful, chatting about her day and even complimenting him on his choice of restaurant. Eric, however, can't shake the image of her laughing with Mike or the messages he read. He's distracted, his mind racing through scenarios of how to confront her or if he should wait. Every smile, every laugh she shares with him feels hollow. She's acting like everything is fine, and that's what stings the most. How can she pretend when he knows the truth? As the meal progresses, Rachel starts noticing his silence. She pauses and asks him, "Is something wrong, Eric?" It's the opening he's been waiting for, but as he looks at her, he hesitates. All the words he'd prepared in his mind seem too heavy, too harsh to say aloud. Instead, he responds with a casual, "No, just a bit tired from work." But he can see in her eyes that she's not convinced. He can sense her wondering if he suspects anything. There's a moment of tension before she changes the topic, clearly wanting to avoid whatever's lurking beneath the surface. Over the next few weeks, Eric's inner turmoil only grows. He goes through the motions, pretending to be the loving husband, while inside he's crumbling. His work begins to suffer. He's distracted, unable to focus, and his boss even notices. At home, he finds himself pulling away from Rachel, subtly avoiding moments that would normally bring them closer. He skips their usual morning coffee together, making excuses to leave early. The intimacy, which was already fading, disappears completely, replaced by an icy silence that neither of them can ignore. One evening, after a particularly tough day at work, Eric decides he can't keep pretending. He's tired of feeling like an outsider in his own life, watching everything he's built crumble in front of him. He needs to do something, anything, to regain control. He starts by doing some digging, checking phone records, paying close attention to Rachel's schedule, and even looking through her social media. His suspicions are confirmed. The frequency of her meetups with Mike is much higher than he realized. They're meeting several times a week, often under the pretense of yoga or errands. Desperate for answers, Eric reaches out to Jenna, Mike's wife. They've never been close, but he figures she might be noticing the same strange behavior. He arranges to meet her for coffee, and when they sit down, he doesn't beat around the bush. "Jenna, I think there's something going on between Mike and Rachel. Have you noticed anything off?" Her eyes widen, and he can tell she's been suspecting it too. She admits that Mike has been distant, often working late or going to the gym, which she now realizes might have just been excuses. They talk for hours, piecing together every small detail, every moment that didn't add up. By the end of it, there's no doubt left in either of their minds. Their spouses are having an affair. This discovery leaves Eric feeling both relieved and devastated. He's glad to have confirmation, but the reality of it, the betrayal, the lies, it's almost too much to bear. Jenna is equally heartbroken. They make a pact to confront their spouses, agreeing that they need answers and that both Rachel and Mike need to know they've been found out. Eric waits until the weekend, planning a moment when the kids are out of the house. When the time comes, he sits Rachel down in the living room, and there's a silence that feels like it could swallow them both. She looks at him, sensing the seriousness in his expression, but she doesn't say a word. "I know about you and Mike," he says, keeping his voice steady, though his heart is pounding. Rachel's face pales, and she tries to deny it, but Eric cuts her off, listing every detail, every lie, every text message he saw. There's no way for her to deny it. Finally, she breaks down, admitting to the affair. She tells him it started months ago, during one of those wine nights that Eric had dismissed as innocent. She says she didn't plan for it to happen. It just felt right in the moment. But Eric can't believe it. After 17 years of marriage, she decided to throw it all away for some fleeting attraction? Eric feels a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness as she tries to explain. She talks about feeling unseen, like she lost herself after becoming a mother and a wife. She says that Mike made her feel alive again, that he reminded her of who she used to be. But Eric isn't interested in her reasons. To him, they're just excuses, ways for her to justify the damage she's done. He asks her one final question, one he isn't sure he wants the answer to. "Do you love him?" Rachel hesitates, then shakes her head. "No, it was never about love. I love you, Eric. I made a mistake. I was stupid. And I'm so sorry." The words fall flat. Eric has spent years building his life around her, supporting her, being there for her. And now she's saying it was all a mistake? He stands up, unable to look at her, and leaves the house. He drives aimlessly, ending up at a local park, where he sits alone on a bench, trying to make sense of everything. For hours, he goes over their years together, the good and the bad, wondering if any of it was real. Over the next few days, Rachel tries to apologize, but Eric barely responds. He's too hurt, too lost in his own thoughts to listen. He considers his options. Should he leave, start fresh, try to rebuild on his own? Or should he stay and work through it for the sake of their family? Part of him wants to believe that they can fix things, that they can find their way back to what they had. But another part, the part that's been wounded, isn't sure he can ever trust her again. Jenna, meanwhile, confronts Mike with similar results. He admits to the affair but tries to downplay it, claiming it meant nothing, and that he'd been feeling neglected. Jenna is furious, feeling betrayed not only by her husband, but by the friendship she thought she had with Rachel. She decides she can't stay in a marriage built on lies, and within a week, she's filed for divorce. Eric's torn between two worlds, one where he forgives Rachel and tries to rebuild, and another where he walks away, leaving behind the life they shared. His family, his future, everything is on the line. He knows he has to make a choice, but every time he thinks he's ready, doubt creeps back in. As the days turn into weeks, Rachel becomes more remorseful, going out of her way to show Eric that she's committed to making things right. She quits her outings with friends, spends more time at home, and even agrees to couples therapy. She tells him she'll do whatever it takes, that she's willing to fight for their marriage, but Eric is hesitant. Therapy feels like a step, but he's not sure if it's enough to repair the damage. Eventually, they start therapy sessions. The counselor encourages them to talk openly, to be honest about their feelings. Rachel reveals that she felt disconnected, like they were just coexisting, rather than truly living together. She says she thought Eric had stopped seeing her, stopped noticing the small things that made her feel loved. Eric, for his part, expresses his anger, his hurt, and his disappointment in her choices. He tells her that while he understands people can feel lost, He can't understand why she chose to betray him instead of coming to him. The sessions bring some clarity, and they start to make small progress. Eric begins to see that Rachel is genuinely sorry and that she's willing to put in the effort to change. But he still has reservations. The betrayal is a wound that may never fully heal, and he's not sure he can move past it. Every time he looks at her, he remembers the messages, the secret meetings, and the lies. It's like a shadow hanging over them, reminding him of everything they lost. Their kids, though unaware of the affair, sense the tension between their parents. Emma asks Eric one day if he and Mom are okay, and he struggles to find an answer. He wants to protect them from the truth, but he also doesn't want to lie. He tells her that they're working through some things, but that they both love her and her brother more than anything. Emma nods, though she's clearly worried. It's yet another reminder for Eric of what's at stake. One night, after a particularly intense therapy session, Rachel breaks down. She tells Eric she understands if he can never forgive her, that she'll accept whatever decision he makes. She says she knows she hurt him in ways she can't take back, but that she'll spend the rest of her life trying to make it up to him if he'll let her. Eric's torn. He looks at her, seeing both the woman he fell in love with and the one who broke his heart. He knows there's no easy answer, no quick fix. As the days turn into months, Eric and Rachel continue with their therapy, but progress is slow. Eric is trying to move forward, but every step feels like it's mired in doubt and frustration. Despite her remorse, he can't shake the memories of her betrayal. Every time he sees her glance at her phone or leave the house, he wonders if he's just waiting for history to repeat itself. One evening, things reach a boiling point. Rachel, sensing the tension still between them, suggests they take a weekend getaway, a chance to reconnect without the kids or distractions. She's hopeful that some time alone might help them remember what they loved about each other. But Eric hesitates. The thought of pretending everything is okay feels exhausting, but he agrees, if only to finally get a clear answer on whether he can move past this or not. They drive to a small cabin a few hours outside the city. The setting is beautiful, with towering trees and a quiet lake nearby, but the atmosphere between them is anything but peaceful. On the first night, they sit by the fireplace, each of them wrapped in their own thoughts, until Rachel finally breaks the silence. "Eric, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back," she begins, her voice trembling. "But I need to know if there's any part of you that still wants to make this work." Eric looks at her, searching her face for something. Sincerity, regret, maybe a hint of the woman he fell in love with. He tells her that he wants to move forward, but that he can't just forget what happened. He explains that every time he tries, he's reminded of the betrayal, the lies, and the way she turned to someone else instead of him. He's brutally honest, telling her that he feels like he's lost not only his wife, but also his own self-respect. Rachel listens, tears streaming down her face, but she doesn't interrupt. When he's finished, she nods, as if she's accepting his pain. She apologizes again, saying that she'll spend her life trying to make things right if he'll let her, but that she understands if he can't. That night, they sleep in separate rooms, the weight of their conversation hanging over them. Eric lies awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this marriage can ever be saved or if it's time to let go. He's caught between his love for her and the reality of her betrayal, and for the first time, he considers the possibility of moving on without her. The following day, things take an unexpected turn. While out on a walk by the lake, Eric's phone rings. It's Jenna, Mike's now ex-wife, who's been a source of support for him through all of this. She tells him that Mike has been reaching out to her, claiming he regrets the affair and wants to reconcile. Jenna's hurt, angry, and unsure what to do, and she's calling Eric for advice. They talk for a while, sharing their frustrations, and by the end of the call, Eric feels an odd sense of clarity. He realizes that, unlike Jenna, he's not interested in revenge or in holding on to bitterness. He wants peace for himself and his kids, whether that means staying with Rachel or not. That evening, he and Rachel talk again. He tells her about Jenna's call and admits that he's tired of feeling angry, tired of holding on to something that's only bringing him pain. He tells her that he's willing to try one last time, but that things have to change, and that if she ever betrays him again, it's over. Rachel, overcome with relief, promises to make it right. She tells him she'll do whatever it takes to rebuild his trust, and that she understands this is her last chance. They embrace, and for the first time in months, Eric feels a glimmer of hope, a faint belief that maybe, just maybe, they can find their way back to each other. When they return home, things begin to shift. Rachel starts being more transparent, sharing her schedule, her phone, and her whereabouts without hesitation. She's determined to prove to Eric that he can trust her. And little by little, he starts to believe her. They continue therapy, and Eric finds himself opening up more, sharing the depths of his hurt, and slowly letting go of the anger he's been carrying. But the road to recovery is far from smooth. There are moments when Eric feels like they're making progress, only to be hit by a wave of doubt or a flash of memory that brings the pain back. He's learning to live with it, though, realizing that healing isn't a straight line but a series of steps forward and back. One evening, as they're having dinner with their kids, Emma, their eldest, brings up a question. "Are you and Mom okay? You seem different." Eric and Rachel exchange a glance, caught off guard. They'd been trying to shield the kids from the worst of it, but clearly, they've noticed. Eric chooses his words carefully, telling Emma that they've been working through some things, but that they both love her and Ben more than anything. He assures her that they're doing everything they can to keep their family strong. Emma nods, but her eyes linger on her parents, a mixture of worry and hope. It's a reminder for both Eric and Rachel of what's at stake and why they're fighting to make this work. As time goes on, Eric starts to feel more like himself again. He reconnects with friends, takes up hobbies he'd abandoned, and even starts going to the gym. He realizes that part of his healing means rediscovering who he is outside of his marriage, building his own sense of self-worth and happiness. Rachel notices the change in him and encourages it, knowing that this is part of his journey back to wholeness. Then, one day, a letter arrives in the mail. It's from Mike, addressed to both Eric and Rachel. In it, he apologizes for the pain he's caused, admitting that he was selfish and careless and that he regrets his actions deeply. He tells them that he's moving out of town, hoping that his absence will allow them to heal. It's a gesture that, while small, brings Eric a sense of closure. He feels like he can finally put the past behind him and focus on the future. For the first time since the affair, Eric feels a genuine sense of peace. He looks at Rachel, who's reading the letter with a mix of relief and sadness, and he realizes that they've both come a long way. They've faced their worst fears, their darkest moments, and somehow, they've come out on the other side. It's not perfect, and it never will be, but they're learning to live with it, to rebuild their trust one day at a time. Months later, they find themselves back at the cabin, this time with a renewed sense of hope. They sit by the lake, watching the sunset, and Eric realizes that while the scars of betrayal will always be there, he's no longer defined by them. He's found strength in himself, in his family, and in his ability to forgive, and he knows that whatever the future holds, he'll be okay. Back at home, Eric and Rachel's fragile peace is put to the ultimate test. Though Rachel has worked tirelessly to prove her loyalty, and Eric has started to feel glimmers of trust, everything changes with one phone call. One Friday night, while Eric is alone, his phone rings. It's Jenna. Her voice is shaking as she tells him that Mike has resurfaced and has been reaching out to her, trying to reconcile. But it's not just that. Jenna tells Eric that Mike is claiming Rachel was more than just a casual fling, that their affair was deep and ongoing right up until he moved out of town. Eric's heart drops. The thought that there might have been more secrets, more lies, feels like a punch to the gut. He ends the call with Jenna, a feeling of betrayal simmering once again. Could Rachel have hidden even more? When Rachel returns home that night, Eric confronts her, his face pale and voice low. "Jenna called." He begins, his voice barely masking his anger. She says Mike's been telling her that your affair wasn't just a fling, that it was more than you told me. Was it? Rachel's face goes pale. She insists, tearfully, that it wasn't true, that Mike is lying to save face and manipulate Jenna. She swears that she was honest with Eric about everything, that she never loved Mike, and that it was always him, always Eric. But Eric's distrust has flared back up, and he isn't sure if he can believe her. The weight of her betrayal feels fresh again, and he's no longer sure if he's willing to rebuild with someone he's constantly doubting. Days pass, with tension filling every corner of their house. Eric becomes distant and irritable, while Rachel's attempts to reassure him feel hollow. Their kids notice the coldness between them, asking more questions, clearly sensing that their family is hanging by a thread. Eric knows he has to make a decision soon, to either commit to rebuilding or to walk away. But every time he tries to decide, he's haunted by Jenna's words and the possibility that Rachel still isn't telling him the whole truth. Finally, after another sleepless night, Eric makes a bold choice. He tells Rachel they're taking a polygraph test. If she's telling the truth, she'll have nothing to hide, and he can finally start letting go of his doubts. Rachel is stunned, hurt, but she agrees, understanding that this may be the only way to prove herself to him once and for all. On the day of the test, they drive in silence to the polygraph examiner's office. The tension between them is suffocating, with neither of them daring to look at each other. For Rachel, this test feels humiliating, an undeniable consequence of her betrayal. For Eric, it's a last-ditch effort to regain a sense of control and peace in their relationship. The test begins, with the examiner asking Rachel a series of questions. Did she love Mike? Was their relationship ongoing after she initially confessed to Eric? Did she lie about any part of her story? Rachel answers each question calmly, her voice steady as she assures Eric, for the last time, that Mike meant nothing and that her only regret is hurting her husband. When the test ends, they sit in silence, waiting for the examiner to review the results. It's an excruciating wait, with Eric's heart pounding as he braces for what might be the end of everything he's fought to rebuild. Rachel stares at the floor, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, silently praying that this will be enough to prove her sincerity. The examiner finally returns with the results, confirming that Rachel answered truthfully on every question. There were no lies, no deception, no hidden feelings. For Eric, it's a moment of profound relief mixed with lingering resentment. He knows that she's telling the truth, but the pain of betrayal is still there, and he wonders if he'll ever be able to fully forgive her. They leave the office, the silence between them heavier than ever. For Rachel, the test feels like a double-edged sword. While it cleared her name, it's also a stark reminder of how broken their marriage has become. For Eric, it's a wake-up call, a reminder that if he's going to truly rebuild, he has to let go of his anger and learn to trust again. But he's not sure he can. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at home gradually lightens. The polygraph results give Eric a newfound sense of security, and he starts to let down his walls little by little. Rachel, too, senses the shift, and she begins to feel hopeful that their marriage might survive. They start spending more time together, going on family outings with the kids, and even planning a weekend getaway. For the first time since the affair, they feel like a real family again. But just as things seem to be getting better, Eric receives a shocking piece of news that threatens to destroy the fragile peace they've built. Just as Eric and Rachel are beginning to feel hopeful about their future, everything takes a sudden and dramatic turn. One afternoon, while Eric is at work, he gets a call from Jenna. Her voice is frantic, almost unrecognizable, as she tells him that Mike is back in town. She explains that she ran into him at a grocery store, and he hinted at something that makes Eric's blood run cold. He said he knew things about Rachel that she'd never admit, Jenna says, her voice shaking. He claimed there's more to the story, that she lied about how long it went on and about what they did together. Eric's stomach drops. Just when he thought he was finally beginning to trust Rachel again, another wave of doubt crashes over him. Why would Mike lie now, when they're all trying to move on? Or is there a chance he's telling the truth? That night, Eric confronts Rachel once again. He tries to stay calm, but the frustration and betrayal bubbling inside him make it impossible. He tells her about Jenna's call, about Mike's claims, and asks her point-blank if there's anything else she's been hiding. Rachel looks at him, stunned, and insists that she's already told him everything. She's visibly shaken, clearly hurt by the accusation, but Eric's not backing down. He's tired of the half-truths, tired of the constant suspicion. He tells her that he can't take any more secrets and that if there's anything else, Even the smallest detail, she needs to tell him now. After a long, tense silence, Rachel finally admits to something she hadn't told him before. She says that while she was trying to end things with Mike, he became increasingly insistent. He'd sent her messages, showed up at her office, and tried to convince her to leave Eric. She swears that she ignored him, that she was firm in telling him it was over, but that she didn't tell Eric because she didn't want to worry him or make things worse. Eric is furious. To him, it feels like another betrayal, another piece of information she'd kept from him. He tells her that if she'd been honest from the beginning, maybe things would be different now. But each time she withholds something, even if it seems minor, it feels like another dagger to the heart. Rachel tries to defend herself, explaining that she didn't want to add to his pain, but Eric's patience has run out. Their argument escalates, voices raised as they hash out months' worth of pain, anger, and frustration. Rachel begs him to believe that she's told him everything now, that there's nothing more to hide, but Eric feels like he's at a breaking point. He realizes he's been carrying this weight for too long, and he's no longer sure if he can keep going. For the first time, he tells her he's considering leaving, that maybe the damage is too deep, and that even love might not be enough to fix what's been broken. This statement sends Rachel into a spiral of guilt and despair. She begs him not to leave, promising she'll do anything to make it right. But Eric, feeling emotionally exhausted, tells her he needs time to think. He packs a bag and leaves, heading to a hotel for the night to clear his head. While alone in the hotel room, Eric goes over every moment of their relationship, from the early days when they were deeply in love to the years when they were simply getting by, to the pain and betrayal of the last few months. He realizes that his love for Rachel is still there, buried beneath the anger, but he questions whether love is enough to overcome the mistrust that now defines their relationship. The next day, Eric receives a message from Jenna, who's just had another confrontation with Mike. This time, she recorded it, hoping it would provide Eric with the truth he's been searching for. She sends him the audio file, explaining that Mike admitted to embellishing his claims in an attempt to get back at Rachel and Eric for ruining his reputation. In the recording, Mike reveals that he exaggerated details, saying things just to hurt them and keep the tension alive. Listening to the recording, Eric feels a mixture of relief and rage. He's relieved that Rachel hadn't hidden more from him, but furious at how Mike's manipulations almost tore his family apart again. With newfound clarity, Eric realizes that his anger has been clouding his judgment, making him question every decision Rachel made. He starts to see that if he's going to rebuild this marriage, he has to let go of the anger that's been consuming him. That evening, he goes back home, ready to have an honest conversation with Rachel. When he arrives, he finds her sitting on the couch, looking as though she hasn't slept all night. She stands up as he enters, her face filled with worry and fear. Before she can say anything, Eric plays the recording Jenna sent him. Rachel listens, relief flooding her face as she realizes Mike's lies have been exposed. But Eric isn't done. He tells her that while he believes her now, trust isn't something he can simply force. It has to be rebuilt slowly and with effort from both sides. They sit down and talk, finally reaching a turning point where they're able to lay everything out on the table. Rachel apologizes, not just for the affair but for the months of secrecy and half-truths that have kept Eric trapped in a cycle of doubt. She tells him that she's committed to earning his trust back, no matter how long it takes, and that she understands if he needs time and space to heal. Eric listens, feeling the weight of his anger start to lift. For the first time, he feels that maybe, just maybe, they can truly move forward. He tells Rachel that while forgiveness won't come overnight, he's willing to try, and that he still believes in the possibility of healing. It's a small step, but it feels monumental to both of them. Over the next few months, they continue to work on their marriage, attending therapy together and finding new ways to reconnect. Eric starts to let his walls down, and Rachel makes every effort to show him that she's committed to their family. It's not easy, and there are days when doubt creeps back in, but they both stay committed to the process. In time, Eric finds that he can look at Rachel without the shadow of betrayal hanging over them. He begins to trust her again, not fully but enough to feel a sense of peace. And as they celebrate their anniversary, He realizes that they've come through the worst of it, that they're stronger for having faced the darkness together. It's not a perfect ending, but it's real, and for them that's enough. After Eric returns home and listens to the recording Jenna sent, he feels a surge of emotions that he can barely contain. There's relief that Rachel hadn't kept more from him, but also a deep anger at Mike for manipulating them, stirring up pain, and nearly breaking their family apart all over again. Eric realizes he's at a crossroads. He has a decision to make, one that could define his future with Rachel and his own peace of mind. That evening, when Eric steps back into their house, Rachel is waiting for him, her eyes red and puffy from what was clearly a sleepless night. She can see the storm in his eyes and braces herself, unsure if he's come home to work things out or to say goodbye. The tension between them is thick, and for a long moment, neither of them speaks. Then, in a soft, calm voice, Eric finally tells her everything. He plays the recording from Jenna, allowing her to hear Mike's admission and manipulative lies. Rachel's face shifts from confusion to shock to deep sadness, and Eric can see that she's as relieved as he is to know the truth. But he's not finished. Eric takes a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he speaks. "Rachel," he begins, "we can't keep doing this. I need to know, right now, if you're fully committed to rebuilding what we have or if this is just you feeling guilty." He looks her squarely in the eyes, and Rachel, her voice trembling, assures him that she wants nothing more than to repair their marriage and be the partner he deserves. Eric feels the weight of his words. He tells her that he's willing to stay, but only if they commit fully to rebuilding trust and honesty. No more secrets. He says he's done carrying the anger and the doubts and that he's willing to let go of it if she can promise to be the person he can trust again. Rachel is overcome, and tears start streaming down her face. She promises Eric that she'll do whatever it takes, that she'll spend every day proving to him that he's her only priority. But Eric isn't done. He tells her that while he's willing to work on things, he needs time to heal and regain trust in her and in their relationship. Rachel agrees, understanding that this won't be a quick fix, but a long road that requires both of them to rebuild from the ground up. Their conversation that night becomes the true turning point in their relationship. For the first time, they sit down and openly discuss everything. The pain, the mistakes, the guilt, and the fears. Rachel tells Eric about the moments that led her to make those terrible choices, sharing parts of herself she'd been afraid to show him before. Eric, in turn, shares the hurt and betrayal he's felt, expressing the depth of the impact her actions had on him. It's a raw, emotional conversation, and by the end of it, both of them are exhausted. But they feel a sense of relief, as if a weight they'd been carrying for months has finally been lifted. In the weeks that follow, Eric and Rachel start to rebuild their marriage with newfound honesty and transparency. Rachel goes out of her way to show Eric that he's her priority, making small gestures that remind him of the early days of their relationship. They go on dates, spend time with their kids, and even take up new hobbies together, finding new ways to connect and laugh together. Eric, too, finds himself letting his guard down, opening up to Rachel in ways he hadn't before, and slowly, he starts to feel a sense of peace. But the journey is far from easy. There are days when the doubts creep back in, when a small comment or a familiar reminder brings the pain rushing back. Eric knows it's part of the process, but he finds comfort in the fact that Rachel is there, ready to reassure him whenever he needs it. And gradually, those moments of doubt start to lessen, replaced by moments of warmth, laughter, and love that remind him of why he fell in love with her in the first place. One evening, as they're sitting together on the porch, watching the sunset, Rachel turns to Eric and thanks him for giving her a second chance. She tells him that she knows she didn't deserve his forgiveness, but that she's grateful every day for the opportunity to make things right. Eric, feeling a surge of emotion, takes her hand and tells her that while the pain may never fully disappear, he believes that they've both grown stronger because of it. They sit in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange, a feeling of peace settling over them. They know they'll still face challenges, that there will be days when old wounds resurface, but they also know that they're willing to face them together. In the following months, their relationship continues to grow, and they find themselves feeling closer than they have in years. They're able to laugh together, to share dreams for the future, and to feel a renewed sense of commitment to each other and their family. Eric finds that he no longer sees Rachel as the person who hurt him, but as the person who chose to stay, to fight for their love and rebuild something beautiful from the ruins of their past mistakes. By the time they celebrate their next anniversary, they feel as though they've come full circle. Their marriage is no longer defined by betrayal, but by the resilience they showed in overcoming it. It's not a fairy tale ending, but it's real, and for Eric and Rachel, that's enough. As Eric and Rachel work on rebuilding their marriage, the final test of their relationship approaches in a way neither of them expected. Despite their efforts, the lingering shadows of betrayal still lurk in the background. They've taken steps forward, but trust is fragile, and it only takes one wrong move for everything they've worked toward to teeter on the edge again. One weekend, they're invited to a mutual friends gathering, a small get-together with some old friends. Eric hesitates, not wanting to be surrounded by people who might remind him of their past. But Rachel encourages him, reminding him that they can't keep hiding from the world forever. She promises to be by his side the whole time, reassuring him that they'll get through it together. With some reluctance, Eric agrees, hoping this will be another step toward moving forward. At the party, things go well at first. They laugh with friends, share stories, and for a moment it feels like things might actually be returning to normal. But as the evening goes on, Eric notices Rachel slipping into conversations with others, leaving him alone more often than he expected. He watches her from across the room, a familiar anxiety creeping up as he recalls how easily she once hid things from him. Then, to his dismay, he sees someone unexpected. Mike. Somehow, he's managed to get an invitation to the party, and he's standing only a few feet from Rachel. Eric's heart pounds in his chest as he sees them exchange glances. Rachel quickly looks away, but Mike, with his usual smug expression, approaches her, clearly unfazed by her discomfort. Eric's fists clench, a surge of emotions rising within him as he fights to keep his composure. He trusts Rachel. At least he wants to trust her. But the sight of Mike standing so close, a reminder of everything they went through, makes his stomach turn. He watches as Rachel takes a step back, clearly uneasy, but Mike keeps talking, his smirk only growing. Finally, unable to take it any longer, Eric walks over, his face set with determination. He places a protective arm around Rachel, letting Mike know he's there. He looks Mike squarely in the eyes and, with a firm tone, tells him, "We don't need you here, Mike. I think it's time for you to leave." The tension is thick as the two men stare each other down, and for a moment it feels like things might turn violent. But Mike just smirks, shrugs, and saunters away, leaving Eric and Rachel standing there, both shaken by the encounter. Rachel looks up at Eric, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She whispers, "I'm sorry you had to see that he's even here." Eric sighs, his anger softening as he realizes that she's just as uncomfortable as he is. He pulls her close, and they both find a quiet corner to sit, away from the crowd. They don't talk much, but the silence between them feels comforting, a reminder that they're in this together. After that night, Eric's resolve strengthens. He realizes that they've been living under the shadow of the past for too long and that if they're going to move forward, he has to let go of his anger completely. He can't control what happened, and he can't change the past, but he can decide what he'll bring into their future. He tells Rachel that he's ready to start fresh, that he's willing to truly forgive and rebuild without looking back. Rachel is overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face as she thanks him for his strength, his patience, and his willingness to give them another chance. They make a pact that night to leave the past behind for good and focus on creating a future that's defined not by betrayal, but by resilience, love, and honesty. In the days that follow, Eric notices a significant shift in both himself and their relationship. He feels lighter, more at ease, and he realizes that he's no longer carrying the weight of distrust. Rachel, too, seems different, more open, more loving, and completely devoted to their family. They start planning more activities together, with both the kids and as a couple, and their life begins to take on a new, hopeful rhythm. The story reaches its peak when, on the anniversary of the day everything fell apart, Eric surprises Rachel with a heartfelt gesture. He's arranged for them to renew their vows, a private ceremony with just their closest family and friends. Standing in front of each other, they exchange words that reflect the journey they've been on, the pain, the healing, and the hope that's blossomed from the ashes of their past. Rachel's voice trembles as she promises to cherish Eric, to never take him for granted, and to honor the love they've rebuilt. Eric, too, speaks from the heart, vowing to trust her fully, to protect their family, and to let go of the pain they've carried for so long. As they exchange rings, they both feel a sense of peace, a quiet strength that assures them they've made it through the storm together. The vows mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that isn't haunted by mistakes but filled with newfound understanding and commitment. Their friends and family celebrate with them, and for the first time in a long time, Eric and Rachel feel a sense of closure. As they dance together, swaying to the soft music, they realize that the road ahead may still have challenges, but they're no longer afraid. They've faced their worst fears, confronted the hardest truths, and found their way back to each other. Their love may be scarred, but it's stronger, resilient, and built to last. And with that, they start a new journey together, one marked by the hard-won wisdom that came from nearly losing everything, only to find that sometimes, what doesn't break you truly can make you stronger. Just when Eric and Rachel think they've finally found a sense of stability, a new piece of information surfaces, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they've built. One afternoon, Eric receives an unexpected email from an anonymous sender. Attached is a string of old messages between Rachel and Mike, messages he's never seen before. Reading them, his heart sinks as he realizes they're from early in the affair, detailing the way they used to meet up, share secrets, and express feelings that seem painfully intimate. The messages take him back to square one, stirring up emotions he thought he'd let go of. His mind reels with questions. Did Rachel hide these from him? Was there still more to the story? He'd wanted to move on, but now, faced with this fresh reminder, the bitterness comes rushing back. He struggles with whether to bring it up, knowing it might reopen old wounds, but he can't ignore it. That evening, after hours of rehearsing what he'll say, Eric confronts Rachel once again. When he shows her the messages, Rachel looks devastated, her face going pale as she realizes the trust they've worked so hard to rebuild is slipping through their fingers. She explains that she had forgotten about those messages, that she had tried to delete everything related to Mike in an attempt to start fresh. But Eric's trust is wavering once more, and he questions her honesty, wondering if she's been fully transparent. Rachel, sensing the urgency, insists they revisit therapy immediately. She tells Eric that she'll do anything to make him feel secure, to prove that she's committed to leaving the past behind. Eric agrees, but with a lingering hesitation, another reminder that trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. At their next session, the therapist encourages them to talk about why these setbacks keep happening, why both of them seem to be holding on to fragments of the past. Rachel acknowledges that she's been trying so hard to erase Mike from her life that she never faced her own feelings of guilt and regret fully. She admits to Eric, in front of the therapist, that she's been afraid of confronting just how much pain she caused, choosing instead to bury it. Eric, meanwhile, shares how every reminder, every small detail that resurfaces, reignites his anger and makes him question his decision to stay. The therapist suggests they each confront these emotions head-on, without hiding or minimizing the damage. The suggestion feels heavy, but Eric and Rachel both agree it's necessary. They leave the session with a sense of determination, knowing this is their last chance to truly put things to rest. They decide to take a weekend alone, away from the kids and distractions, to dive into this once and for all. That weekend, at a small cabin they'd visited years ago, they sit by the fire, prepared for what could be their most difficult conversation yet. Rachel begins by opening up fully, detailing everything she can remember about her time with Mike, her feelings of loneliness, and the excitement she felt, even though it came at such a high price. She admits that she had used those moments to escape from problems in their marriage, a reality she hadn't been brave enough to face. For the first time, Eric hears her perspective without judgment, taking in her words with a painful but necessary clarity. Eric, in turn, shares how deeply her actions had shattered him, how the affair made him question not only their relationship but his own self-worth. He confesses that, despite his attempts to forgive, he'd been carrying around anger and resentment, unable to let go entirely. They talk for hours, neither holding back, allowing all the pain, guilt, and regret to come to the surface. As the conversation continues into the night, something begins to shift. By openly acknowledging everything, without hiding or deflecting, they finally start to understand each other on a level they hadn't before. It's raw, exhausting, and emotionally draining, but by the end, they feel a sense of release. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, they can rebuild on this foundation of honesty. The next morning, they wake up with a sense of calm. They've confronted their worst fears, looked their pain in the eye, and survived. Eric looks at Rachel and feels a genuine sense of compassion, realizing that she's as human as he is, flawed and imperfect but willing to change. Rachel, in turn, sees Eric's strength and his willingness to give them a second chance, despite everything. In that moment, they both know that while their marriage may never be the same, they have a real chance at building something new. Returning home, they feel different, lighter, almost as if they've shed the burden of the past. Their children notice the change, and for the first time in a long time, the house feels like a home again, filled with laughter, shared meals, and the beginnings of a real bond. They continue with therapy, now focusing on building trust and finding joy in their relationship, rather than rehashing the pain. Eric feels a renewed sense of hope, realizing that he no longer sees Rachel as someone who hurt him, but as someone who's fought to be better, for herself and for their family. They make plans for the future, talking about places they'd like to visit, hobbies they want to take up together, and dreams they want to fulfill. The affair, once a source of despair, becomes a reminder of the resilience they've found in each other. For the first time, Eric finds himself truly forgiving Rachel. He knows that healing won't be linear, that there may still be days when memories resurface, but he's confident they'll face those moments together. He sees their marriage not as something broken and repaired, but as something transformed, made stronger by the trials they've endured. Their journey has been long and painful, marked by moments of doubt and heartbreak, but in the end, they've found their way back to each other. Standing together, they know they've built something new, something real, imperfect, but enduring. As Eric and Rachel continue working on their fragile relationship, the tension and stakes only get higher. They've put in countless hours in therapy, they've made sacrifices, and they've promised each other to try and move past the betrayal. Yet, as we all know, love isn't always enough to erase the memories, especially when trust is broken so deeply. One afternoon, Rachel receives a message that turns everything upside down. It's from Mike, her former affair partner, who's somehow resurfaced after all these months. The message is brief, but it's enough to send a chill down her spine. Mike's words are cryptic but unsettling, suggesting that he wants to meet one last time to clear things up. Rachel is horrified. She doesn't want anything to do with him, but she also realizes this could be her last chance to truly end things with Mike, making it clear that she's moved on. She wrestles with what to do, fearing that if she tells Eric, it could unravel the fragile peace they've built. Meanwhile, Eric notices Rachel's unease and confronts her. She hesitates, knowing that the wrong word could bring everything crashing down. But after a moment, she admits to receiving the message, showing Eric the text. The sight of Mike's name alone ignites a wave of anger in him, but he tries to keep his cool, recognizing the progress they've made. He demands to know what Mike wants, why he's contacting her now after so much time. Rachel, visibly shaken, explains that she has no idea and that she wants nothing to do with him. She assures Eric that she'll block Mike, but Eric isn't convinced. Eric feels the need to confront Mike himself, feeling that he has to protect his family from the man who once came close to tearing it apart. He demands Rachel give him Mike's number, stating that he'll end this once and for all. Rachel is hesitant, fearing that any interaction with Mike could spiral out of control, but she also understands Eric's need for closure. That evening, Eric reaches out to Mike. He doesn't mince words, telling him to stay away from Rachel and their family. Mike, however, has his own agenda. He mocks Eric, suggesting that Rachel hasn't told him everything. He implies there are more details, more secrets that would paint a different picture if Eric knew them. Eric's heart races, a feeling of dread settling over him as he listens to Mike's words. Could Rachel still be hiding something? Eric storms back to Rachel, unable to contain his frustration. He confronts her, demanding to know if there's any truth to Mike's claims. Rachel is visibly hurt by his anger, but she understands the gravity of the situation. She insists that she's told him everything, that there's nothing else he doesn't already know. But Eric's trust is slipping, and he finds himself doubting her again, despite everything they've worked toward. He tells her that he can't keep living like this, that he needs absolute honesty, or their relationship has no future. Rachel, desperate to reassure him, suggests one last attempt at restoring trust. She proposes they write down everything, every feeling, every doubt, every hidden fear, so that nothing remains unsaid. Eric agrees, and they sit down together, pouring their thoughts and emotions onto paper. They write letters to each other, sharing their rawest, most vulnerable truths. It's painful, revealing insecurities and lingering wounds, but it also brings a sense of relief as they each face the reality of what's been holding them back. When they read each other's letters, it's like a veil has been lifted. Eric realizes how deeply Rachel has suffered from her own guilt, while Rachel finally sees the depths of Eric's lingering pain. They embrace, each understanding that the only way forward is through complete openness, through accepting the hurt and allowing themselves to heal together. But just as they start to feel a glimmer of hope, they get hit with one last unexpected blow. Just when Eric and Rachel seem to be on the brink of a breakthrough, their attempts to rebuild are shattered by an unexpected turn of events. A week after their intense confrontation and letter exchange, Mike resurfaces in a way neither of them anticipated. Eric arrives home one evening to find an envelope on their doorstep. There's no return address, just his name scrawled across the front. He opens it cautiously, and what he finds inside leaves him reeling. The envelope contains a series of printed photos, images of Rachel and Mike together, clearly taken during the height of their affair. They're intimate, painful reminders of everything Eric has been trying to move past. But what shakes him even more is that he had no idea these photos existed. There's a letter included, written in Mike's scrawled handwriting, saying, "Thought you should see the full picture." Eric feels a surge of anger and betrayal all over again. As he flips through the images, every ounce of trust he's been trying to rebuild seems to disintegrate. He can hardly breathe as he realizes that even though Rachel had confessed to the affair, she'd never mentioned that there were photos. He confronts her the moment she walks through the door. Rachel is visibly horrified when she sees the photos, but she insists that she didn't know Mike had taken them. She swears she never consented to these pictures and had no idea he'd kept them. Eric, however, is too hurt to fully believe her. The old doubts resurface, and he finds himself questioning every moment, every word of reassurance she's given him since the affair came to light. The atmosphere between them grows tense, almost suffocating, as Eric grapples with the betrayal all over again. He tells Rachel that this was his last straw, that he can't keep revisiting the past every time some new piece of information surfaces. Rachel pleads with him, insisting that she truly didn't know, but Eric's anger is consuming him. He feels trapped, as if the life he's been trying to rebuild is a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest gust. For days, they barely speak. Eric withdraws, staying out late, avoiding Rachel, and pouring his energy into work. Rachel, on the other hand, feels lost and desperate, unable to reach him. She realizes that the affair and the lies have left scars deeper than she'd imagined, and she fears this might be the end of their marriage. In a last attempt to salvage what's left, Rachel reaches out to their therapist for an emergency session, hoping they can confront these emotions together rather than drifting further apart. During the session, Eric unleashes the full weight of his frustration and anger, telling Rachel how deeply her betrayal and the constant surprises have affected him. He questions her loyalty, her honesty, and even whether she truly wants to be with him or if she's just trying to avoid the shame of divorce. Rachel, devastated, breaks down, telling Eric how profoundly she regrets her actions and how she spent every day trying to make it up to him. The therapist guides them through the storm of emotions, urging them to dig deeper into their fears and insecurities. Eric admits that he's afraid he'll never truly be able to trust her again, that he'll always be haunted by the possibility of another betrayal. Rachel, in turn, expresses her fear of losing the one person who stood by her through everything, despite her mistakes. She tells Eric that she's willing to face whatever judgment or shame comes their way if it means she can rebuild his trust. After hours of intense conversation, they reach a pivotal moment. The therapist asks them both a crucial question. Are you willing to let go of the past, knowing it will always be there, but choosing to build a new future despite it? The question hangs in the air, heavy with meaning. Eric realizes that holding onto his anger, however justified, is keeping him from moving forward. He feels a wave of clarity. He doesn't want to live trapped in the past. He wants to give their marriage one final chance, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. They leave the session exhausted but with a renewed sense of purpose. They both know that this is their last attempt. If they can't find a way to truly let go of the pain and rebuild, then it's best to part ways. But something about the intensity of that session, about airing out every doubt and fear, has left them feeling a strange sense of hope. In the days that follow, they commit to healing in earnest. Eric makes a conscious effort to stop revisiting the past. He deletes the photos, symbolically cutting ties with the reminders of their darkest moments. Rachel, meanwhile, doubles down on her transparency, making sure Eric knows where she is, what she's doing, and showing him that she's there, truly present, and dedicated to rebuilding his trust. As time passes, they find moments of genuine connection again. There's laughter, shared memories, and slowly, a new sense of love that begins to bloom. They know that their marriage will never be exactly what it once was, but in a way, they're okay with that. What they're building now feels more honest, more intentional, and even though it's imperfect, it's theirs. One evening, they sit on their back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Eric looks at Rachel, feeling a sense of calm that he hasn't felt in years. He realizes that while the scars of the past will always be there, they don't have to define their future. They've survived the storm, and what's left is a marriage forged in resilience and honesty. For the first time, they both feel free. They understand that the road ahead won't be easy, but they're ready to face it together, leaving the pain of the past where it belongs, behind them. Just when Eric and Rachel are beginning to feel like they're finally turning a corner, an unexpected event brings everything they've worked toward crashing down. One evening, while they're having dinner with the kids, Eric's phone rings. It's Jenna, Mike's ex-wife, calling with urgent news. Her voice is tense and urgent, and she quickly tells Eric that Mike has been making troubling claims, suggesting that he's planning to confront Eric and Rachel in person. Eric's heart sinks. Mike's persistence, his constant reappearances, have been a toxic thread woven through the last months of their lives, holding them back from fully moving forward. And now, Mike's threat of a face-to-face confrontation feels like a final, inevitable showdown. Eric and Rachel exchange a look, both recognizing the weight of the moment. They're aware that if Mike confronts them, it could very well drag up every unresolved emotion, every remaining thread of doubt and resentment, and potentially destroy the delicate progress they've made. Later that night, after putting the kids to bed, Eric and Rachel sit together, facing the reality of what might come next. They know that confronting Mike is risky, but they also know that avoiding him could leave a door open for further interference. Eric, calm but resolute, decides he'll meet with Mike, feeling that he needs to put an end to this once and for all. Rachel's initial reaction is fear. She's terrified that this meeting might push Eric over the edge, reigniting all the anger and mistrust he's been trying to let go of. But as she looks into Eric's eyes, she sees a quiet determination. He isn't just doing this out of anger. He's doing it to protect the life they've rebuilt, to close this chapter and move forward. With a deep breath, Rachel agrees to stand by his decision, but she asks to join him. They're in this together, and she wants to face whatever happens by his side. The next morning, Eric arranges to meet Mike in a neutral location, a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far from the eyes and ears of anyone who knows them. Rachel sits beside him, their hands clasped under the table, a physical reminder of the support they're giving each other. After a few tense minutes, Mike arrives, his expression a mix of arrogance and bitterness. He sits across from them, unfazed by their united front. Mike wastes no time, launching into accusations and veiled insults, trying to provoke Eric by painting the affair as something deeper than it was. He claims that Rachel loved him, that she only returned to Eric out of guilt, not genuine commitment. His words are carefully chosen, intended to poke at every scar, every lingering insecurity. At first, Eric feels his anger building, the old wounds aching with every word Mike says. He feels the weight of each insult, each provocation. But he glances at Rachel, seeing the remorse and strength in her eyes, and he remembers the journey they've been on together. Instead of reacting, he takes a steadying breath, allowing Mike's words to wash over him without taking the bait. Rachel, too, finds her own voice in the confrontation. Calmly but firmly, she tells Mike that their relationship was a mistake, a lapse in judgment that she deeply regrets. She tells him that she's chosen to rebuild her life with Eric, not out of guilt, but out of love and a renewed sense of commitment. Her words are quiet but firm, and for the first time, Mike seems to falter, realizing that his attempts to manipulate and control the situation are falling flat. Seeing that his tactics aren't working, Mike tries one last gambit. He brings up the past, reminding Rachel of private details, hoping to stir up old emotions or perhaps humiliate her in front of Eric. But Rachel stays steady, responding with grace and honesty. She acknowledges her mistakes, but she makes it clear that those moments no longer hold any power over her or her relationship with Eric. She's fully committed to moving forward, and she won't allow Mike to dictate her life any longer. Eric, watching his wife's strength, feels a renewed sense of trust. He realizes that Rachel has not only faced her past but has taken responsibility for it, something Mike clearly hasn't done. For Eric, this moment feels like a final release, a shedding of the anger and resentment he's been holding on to. He looks at Mike with a newfound sense of pity, recognizing that the man before him is still trapped in his own mistakes, unable to let go or move on. In a calm but firm tone, Eric tells Mike that this is the last time they'll be speaking. He warns him to stay away from their family and to respect their boundaries, making it clear that any further interference will result in legal action. Mike, seeing the strength in both Eric and Rachel, finally realizes that he has no power left to wield. With a bitter expression, he leaves, his attempts to disrupt their lives finally defeated. As Mike disappears from view, Eric and Rachel sit in silence for a moment, each of them processing what just happened. They feel a weight lift, as if a dark cloud that had been hovering over them for months has finally dissipated. They both realize that this encounter, while painful, has given them the closure they needed. On the drive home, they talk about everything that's happened, reflecting on the journey that brought them to this moment. They know that they're not the same people they were before the affair. They've grown, changed, and emerged from the ashes of their old relationship as stronger, more resilient individuals. There's a sense of peace between them, an understanding that while the past will always be there, it no longer controls their future. In the days and weeks that follow, they feel a renewed sense of closeness. They find joy in the small moments, the shared laughter, and the quiet comfort of being together. Their children notice the change too, sensing the calm and happiness that now fills their home. For the first time in a long time, their family feels whole, not because everything is perfect, but because they've faced their challenges and chosen to move forward together. As they settle into their new life, Eric and Rachel make a promise to each other, to always be open, to communicate, and to cherish the love they've fought so hard to protect. They know that there will still be challenges, but they're ready to face them as a team, bound not only by love, but by the resilience they've discovered within themselves. In the end, they find that their journey wasn't about forgetting the past, but about learning to live with it, growing from it, and using it to create a stronger, more meaningful bond. And with that, they step forward, ready to embrace whatever the future holds, together. Thank you for following along with this story of redemption, resilience, and second chances. If you enjoyed this recap, Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more incredible stories. See you in the next video. In the months following their intense weekend of reflection, Eric and Rachel find a new rhythm, a life that feels richer and more real than before. The tension, distrust, and anxiety that once clouded their relationship have been replaced with a quiet understanding and mutual respect. They both know that forgiveness didn't come easy, and neither did the journey back to each other. But that journey has made them stronger, individually and as a couple. For Eric, this experience taught him the power of resilience. Looking back, he sees that his love for Rachel was tested in ways he never imagined. But beyond just love, he's discovered a well of patience, understanding, and compassion within himself that he hadn't known before. He's learned that forgiveness is not a one-time decision but a commitment to let go of pain every day, to release the bitterness and anger so that healing can truly take root. Rachel, on the other hand, has transformed as well. The guilt she carried for so long is no longer a burden but a lesson she keeps close. She's learned to value honesty above all, recognizing that her choices, even the smallest ones, have lasting impacts on those she loves. The affair taught her the importance of facing her insecurities and fears directly instead of seeking distractions. She's dedicated to being open, showing Eric and their children that she's committed to becoming a better person. Not just for them, but for herself. One evening, as they're having dinner with their kids, they find themselves laughing and sharing stories, their family finally feeling whole again. Emma, their eldest, pauses, looking between her parents with a smile. "You guys seem really happy," she says, almost surprised. Eric and Rachel exchange a glance, both of them realizing how much they've been through to get to this place. Later that night, when the kids are in bed, Eric and Rachel sit together in the living room, reflecting on everything they've overcome. There's a sense of peace in the air, a calm that wasn't there before. Rachel leans into Eric, holding his hand, and they both feel a warmth that words can't quite capture. It's a love that's been tested, stretched to its limits, but it's still there, stronger, deeper, and more resilient. In a final gesture to move forward, they make a promise to each other. They agree to prioritize their relationship, to keep communication open, and to address any issues as they come up instead of letting them fester. They commit to setting time aside each week just for the two of them, a way to keep the connection they fought so hard to rebuild. As life goes on, they find that while the memories of betrayal may never fully fade, they don't have the power they once did. Instead of being defined by the past, their marriage has taken on a new meaning. They've created a relationship that is grounded in honesty, empathy, and a shared understanding that life is too precious to be spent hiding or pretending. Their story ends not with a picture-perfect resolution, but with something real, a promise to keep choosing each other, day after day, no matter what life brings. And in that choice, they find the strength to face whatever comes next together. Thank you for joining me in this story of resilience, love, and redemption. If you enjoyed this recap and want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, share, and comment below with your thoughts. I'll see you in the next video.